Hey everybody, how are you doing out there? It's Anthony from Crazy Tech Lab here, and I've got another simple, easy to follow overclocking guide for you today, this time focusing on AMD's Ryzen 7000 series. But the key thing is that the settings that we'll be using today, while they're specific, I've tested them with the processor that we'll be using, which is the Ryzen 9 7900, which is one of the best 7000 series CPUs out there. It's one of the lower TDP versions. Very, very low temperatures, very low power draw, but still great performance. It is also pretty tweakable when it comes to the settings that we're going to be doing today. Even though we're using a specific processor here, you can apply these settings to any Ryzen 7000 series CPU. In fact, you can easily apply them to any Ryzen 5000 series CPU as well. So we will be using the fabulous MSI MPG B650 Carbon Wi-Fi today, and we will be delving into the BIOS to just tweak a couple of settings here. So if you have an MSI motherboard, you can easily tweak these settings. In fact, this motherboard has a very, very similar BIOS to socket AM4 motherboards. If you have a B450, B550 or X570 motherboard, then you can pretty much follow this guide to the letter as well, especially if you have an MSI motherboard. It will probably work with other motherboard manufacturers as well, but today we are focusing on MSI. So good news for you if you have an MSI motherboard. And here is the motherboard in question. We're also using some Kingston DDR5 memory, which I use in my personal test rigs, and it's absolutely fantastic stuff. And today we will be applying or increasing the frequency of our processor by 700 megahertz. And that is going to provide a massive boost, especially in multi-threaded workloads. So very, very easy to do. What we're not going to be doing today is delving into dozens of different settings. That's very, very difficult to follow. I hear you. From previous videos that I've done like this, in fact, my most popular video with overclocking, or my most popular video ever, in fact, was a very, very simple overclocking guide. Hundreds of comments in there with you guys saying, thank you for just creating this simple overclocking guide because all the other guides out there were just too complicated. So here we are today with a very, very simple guide, another very simple guide for you to follow. The previous video looking at the 13600K, of course, you can also see that on my channel right now, and overclocking one of my favorite CPUs out there right now, of course, with that CPU too. Today though, just tweaking a couple of settings to get that massive performance boost, real world performance boost that you can see at home, and you don't even have to go into the EFI either. We do have an option here for you today if you just want to tweak things from Windows with AMD Ryzen Master. I know that's popular with a lot of you out there, and if you want those settings to stick between overclocks, what you'll be doing is just going into the EFI after that, and we'll be running through how to do that step by step. So first of all, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to my channel. It means a lot to have your support, and if you do subscribe, don't forget to turn on those notifications so you are notified of future videos. So first of all though, just wanted to have a quick word about the overclocking method today. It's technically not overclocking, it's actually using precision boost overdrive and automatic overclocking, for the simple reason that doing a manual overclock, while that's been great in the past for AMD CPUs in some situations, this time round with the Ryzen 7000 series, they're usually running pretty close to the hilt or to their limits out of the box, which means that beating their single core boost or their peak boost is going to be very, very difficult. It needs high voltages, etc., etc. And what that means is if you do a manual overclock applied across all cores, you probably won't be able to get as high as that peak boost frequency. So that means that while you might increase multi-threaded performance, which you probably would do compared to the very low all-core boost frequency of the Ryzen 9 7900, which is just around about 4.3 gigahertz, so it's pretty low. What you will actually be doing is reducing the performance. So even though I managed to get this CPU to about 5 gigahertz with a manual overclock, it means that the much higher frequencies it can reach out of the box across just a few cores or one core, that all that performance boost is lost. So that's not a great way to go with a manual overclock. Yes, you'll get better multi-threaded performance if you're loading all cores in things like Cinebench or rendering, video editing, that kind of stuff. It means that in games, lightly threaded games and other applications, you'll be actually reducing that performance, which is a bit crap. So the only way around that really is to use automatic overclocking and precision boost overdrive, increasing the scaler there to get a performance boost. And you do get a big performance boost. As I've already mentioned, you get 700 megahertz higher boosting with this CPU on the all-core boosting. So that is going to massively impact multi-threaded workloads without impacting on the single core boost. So kind of the best of both worlds. You keep the very, very high out of the box boosting, but you also get a massive bump in multi-threaded workload performance. So that's really, really great to see. Now, there are more in-depth ways of doing this with Curve Optimizer and all that kind of stuff, but that's too much detail into what I wanted to do today, because there are guides out there that you can easily see and follow those letters to the T. But here today, I wanted to keep the tweaking to just 2 settings. So that is what we are going to be doing. If you need more detail, if you want a Curve Optimizer guide, you need to look elsewhere into other videos and that kind of stuff. So don't want anybody crying out in the comments that there are better ways to overclock. That is not what this video is about today. It's about giving people that have probably never overclocked before just 2 options to tweak. And that is why my most popular video has been a video exactly like this one. So that is it from me. So without further ado, let's crack on with the tweaking. Okay, so we are here at the desktop and we will need to grab a few bits of software to start with. And the first one is AMD Ryzen Master. This one here gives us a real-time temperature readout of the processor and also gives us the controls to actually tweak our processor as well in terms of getting more performance out of it and increasing frequencies. We also have CPU-Z, which gives us a great list of all the specifications of our CPU. You can see the voltage and more importantly, you can see the core speed. Specifically, if you right click on core speed, you actually get a real-time readout of all the cores. And here, as we're dealing with the fabulous AMD Ryzen 9 7900, we have 12 cores to investigate here. So what we'll be doing is loading them with a benchmark called Cinebench. And what we'll be doing here is running the multi-core test to see what frequencies we are hitting in standard mode without any overclocking. So that's going to be really important. Also important is seeing the temperature that our CPU gets to. Now the 7900 is a pretty cool running processor because it is limited to a 65 watt TDP. Other processors in the 7000 range are not so cool running. They will regularly hit well above 85, 90 degrees. That's nothing to worry about. That's just what they do. But it might hinder your ability to get a lot more performance out of them, but you should still see some performance. So we've gone with this CPU today because it's a great example of where you can get more performance. And of course, you can apply these same settings to Ryzen 5000 series CPUs as well. So don't forget to do that if you have an older processor. To start with though, we want to see the temperature and the frequency that our CPU hits at normal speeds. So we're going to run the multi-core test, and don't forget all these programs are free to download and you can see the links to all of them in the description below. And we're going to run the multi-core test and see what happens. So straight away, the CPU temperature spikes at about 51 degrees before dropping back a little bit to about 47. Then we're sort of rising up to about 48. So temperature's well within limits. And if we go down here to the CPU frequency and we right click, we can see frequencies around 4.2 to 4.3 gigahertz. So we obviously want to see something higher than 4.2 to 4.3. Ideally, we don't want the temperature to increase much more than 90 degrees because that will mean that things are running pretty hot. But that is kind of what the other Ryzen 7000 series processors are hitting anyway. So starting at 45 is a pretty good point to start from because we're way down from that. So even if we add 30 or 40 degrees to that temperature, it's still manageable. So the score here, about 24,400. So we want to see a higher result than that. So the figures we're looking at is 4.2 to 4.3. We also want to get higher than 24,400, and the temperature base mark or baseline temperature here was about 48 degrees, I think it hit there. So we'll remind ourselves of those figures later. And as we can notice here, the CPU does hit about 5.4, 5.5 gigahertz just on 1 or 2 cores at the same time. Unfortunately, automatic overclocking doesn't traditionally increase the peak boost frequency of the CPU. So that means that multi-core workloads are going to be basically going to be where we are seeing the vast majority of the performance increases. So what we need to do now is head over to Ryzen Master, and as you can see here on the left panel, there's Profile 1. You want to click on that tab and that will bring you to this screen. The only thing that we need to tweak is automatic overclocking, and what we want to do is basically increase this value here, which is the boost override, all the way up to 200, and you don't actually need to do anything else to see a massive increase here. So once you've done that, you need to click apply, and Ryzen Master will need to restart your PC in order to apply that setting. So all you need to do is click restart now, which will restart the PC. And then we just need to wait for the PC to restart and click a few options when we're back in Windows. So we are back at the desktop, and the first thing you'll probably notice is that a message about Ryzen Master will come up, so we just need to click yes on that. And then we will probably get another one a few seconds later. There it is. And what we will see now is that if we go into Profile 1, everything will be as we left it. So you've got automatic overclocking appearing as the first tab. We've got the 200 setting on the boost override, and you can't increase it anymore because the up arrow is grayed out. So that means that everything is applied and we are ready to go, ready for our first test. So if we go back to the home screen, so we can get a temperature readout to see what's actually going on. And if we bring up Cinebench, we will do our first test, and also we need CPU-Z because we want to see how high those frequencies are getting. So we are nearly ready to go. CPU-Z just going through its usual motions, and we are ready. So the first one we want to go for is the multi-core test, and that will give us the readings that we need in terms of temperature and the frequencies. So let's go ahead and run that. So don't forget the frequency that we're looking for or to compare against was about 4.3 gigahertz, 4.2, 4.3 gigahertz that we saw a few moments ago. So if we now click start on that test, we're going to see what actually happens, and straight away you can see the temperature has skyrocketed. We've gone up about 40 degrees or so, but it's holding at under 90 degrees, so that's good. And just look at this frequency. We are at 5.1, just over 5.1 gigahertz across most cores, some just peaking just under that. So you've got about 5.05, 5.02 gigahertz there, but generally we're looking at around 5.1 overall, which is a massive increase compared to where we were before. In fact, we're adding nearly 1,000 megahertz, 1 gigahertz to the frequencies of some of those cores. And as you can see, it's had an absolutely massive impact on Cinebench over here. Our score before was 24,400 points, and we're now looking at 28,800 points. So that's adding, just a quick bit of mental maths here, somewhere in the region of 20% we've added just clicking automatic overclocking in Ryzen Master. So if you don't want to delve into the EFI or anything like that, this is a quick, easy way of getting a heck of a lot more performance. And if we look at the game tests, we can hopefully have a look at those now on the screen. And as you can see, a game test I ran earlier doing this exact same thing, we've actually seen the minimum 99th percentile rise from 107 frames per second to 111 in Far Cry 6 at ultra settings at 1080p. This was with an RTX 4080. And the average frame rate increased from 130 to 141. And that is just using that single click in Ryzen Master. And obviously, by far and away, the biggest benefit here is in multi-threaded applications. So if you're into rendering, video encoding, to some extent photo editing as well, depending on the application that you use, this simple tweak is going to add a whole lot more performance, especially if you've got a CPU such as the Ryzen 9 7900. So that's what we want to see. Massive increase in frequency, quite a bit higher thermals, but they're still tameable. They're only about the mid-80s, which is actually lower than you'd expect with the Ryzen 9 7900X, but massive increase in performance. Okay, so here we are in the EFI, and to get there, what you'll need to do is just tap the delete key when you restart your PC or when you see something appearing on the screen, and that should bring you into the MSI EFI, which we have here. So if you have an MSI motherboard, you're in luck because you can follow these settings to the letter, whether you have an AM4 motherboard or a socket AM5 motherboard. If you have a different motherboard manufacturer's BIOS, then this setting will likely be in a different place, but you can generally apply the same settings. So what we'll do now is just go down to the OC option on the bottom left. We then need to go to advanced CPU configuration, but obviously make sure that you've applied the XMP profile for your memory first, because that will enable your memory to be sitting at the correct speed. So what we'll be going up to here is advanced CPU configuration, and then we want to go to AMD overclocking. So what we have here is the Precision Boost Overdrive option, so you just need to click on that. You don't need to touch anything else. And then once you are in here, what you need to do is set the Precision Boost Overdrive to Advanced, which is the lowest option there. You need to go down to PBO limits and then select motherboard. Then you need to select manual from the Precision Boost Overdrive scaler option, and then that will give you the first setting that we need to sort of dial up down here, which is to set the Precision Boost Overdrive scaler to 10 times. So make sure that is set to 10 times. Next, what we have is the automatic overclocking part, which is just enabling it to increase the frequency. And what we have here is the option to set 200 megahertz. So we're having to tweak more things here than we do in Ryzen Master, because I've found that when you apply automatic overclocking in Ryzen Master, that seems to do everything else that you need to do with Precision Boost Overdrive for you. So it's very, very simple doing it in Ryzen Master. Here, you have to do everything manually, because if you just tweak this setting here and just set it to 200 megahertz, you won't get the same performance increase. So that's just like a little gremlin that I found there that you need to tweak more in the EFI if you want to apply this manually, but this is all you have to do. So just going through that again, Precision Boost Overdrive to Advanced, get everything looking like it does here, PBO limits to manual, Precision Boost Overdrive scaler to manual, Precision Boost Overdrive scaler to 10 times, enable a positive outcome for the boost clock override, and then type in 200 megahertz here, which is the highest setting basically. If you just type 200, that's fine. You can't type in any value higher than this. If you try and type 250, it just goes back to 200, okay? So that you're not gonna see any more performance by increasing that number, because you can't. So that is all you need to do. So you just need to save your settings. I've actually already just reapplied these settings just to make sure everything worked as it should be. So I don't need to save anything here. They were already applied. So we're just gonna go back into Windows now, and we are going to check whether those settings have been applied correctly. So here we are again at the desktop after applying those settings. So we want to see pretty much exactly what we saw before with a CPU frequency of between 5 and 5.1 gigahertz across all cores. We want to see a score of above 28,000, and unfortunately we want to see some slightly higher CPU temperatures as well. So let's go ahead and run that multi-core test. And we'll go down here to CPU-Z and check out the frequencies. Sure enough, we got exactly the same frequencies as we did before, so between 5 and 5.1, just over 5.1 gigahertz, so everything's looking okay there. We got temperatures, high 80s, just ticked over into 90, but that's more than manageable, and still cooler than I've seen with a couple of Ryzen 7000 series CPUs. Everything's holding, everything's looking steady, exactly as we did before. And sure enough, we have exactly the same score as well. We've got a score of 28,700 points, which is pretty much on the dot, exactly where it was before. So that is all you have to do. You just need to tweak one setting in Ryzen Master to see what performance boost you're going to get from your processor, and that's very, very easy to do. You don't need to go into the EFI. You can see a massive performance boost. If you want that settings to stick between reboots, then you can follow these settings exactly as we've given you here today by heading into the EFI, applying all those settings exactly as you saw here, and then you get that massive performance boost. So I really hope that you got something out of the video today. I think Precision Boost Overdrive and automatic overclocking are very, very easy settings to do, and they really provide a big boost with the Ryzen 7000 series, specifically the lower TDP watt versions, because they essentially have their performance curtailed by that TDP limit. But if you just give them a bit of a boost, that multi-core boost, that all-core boost really, really ramps up, and you see some significant performance benefits. So in games though, what you probably won't see is too much of a performance boost unless you're using a multi-threaded game, something that's very, very multi-threaded. So they're the kind of games that will benefit most from this, because overall AMD is pretty aggressive with its boosting anyway. But with the two lower power processors, one of them we use today, you will see a massive ramping up of boost frequencies across all core workloads. So Cinebench and photo editing, video editing, those kind of things are going to see a real boost. In games that you see boosting or many cores making use of that all-core boost, then you will also see a benefit. So hopefully today has been useful for a lot of you, and if you have one of these two processors here, or in another Ryzen 7000 series CPU, or indeed the Ryzen 5000 series, Precision Boost Overdrive and automatic overclocking are a great way to get performance or more performance with tweaking as few settings as possible, which is really, really good. So don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to my channel, and thank you to MSI for providing the MPG B650 carbon Wi-Fi, and we will be back in another video very soon. See you later.